Okay.
What does that say?
Play the intro.
Welcome to the Too Posh Podcast.
I am Gabrielle. I am a former New York Mafia princess, originally from Austria. I am the mother of 3 and the owner of Too Posh Boutique. And here with my beautiful co-host, Marcella, my daughter.
Hello, I'm Marcella. I'm a dancer, choreographer, model, and designer for Too Posh. And I say whatever the I want.
Hi, my name is Cruz. I am a stylist. I also own the Society Salon in the Design District, and I am a short little Mexican with a big personality.
I am Polly. I am a certified sexual health consultant and educator, former professional dominatrix, currently working at the largest adult novelty store in the Texas Panhandle.
What will they say next? Welcome to the Too Posh Podcast.
Welcome, everybody. And we are welcoming a very special guest today, Michelle Jewsbury. Did I say that right? I feel like I mess up your name.
No, that's good.
Michelle is a international philanthropist, author, and speaker. And she is here today with, I think, what is going to be one of our most important episodes that we have ever had, because she is a crusader against domestic violence, sexual abuse, and human trafficking, which I think it affects and touches everyone in some sort of way, and is one of the biggest things ever. And in today's world, with the whole Gabby Petito thing, I think it has even more attention than it has ever had before. Michelle, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you. And I wanted to do 2 episodes with you because I wanted to first talk about your personal story and then what you are doing and this amazing work that you're doing. We'll make a whole second show about that. How do you feel about this?
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be on this platform and to be speaking to your audience. So a little bit about me. I grew up in a small town in Idaho, grew up to 2 loving parents, moved around my whole life. My daddy was military. When I was about 20 years old, I decided that I wanted to move to Hollywood, California to pursue an acting career. So that's what I did. I moved up my car and everything in my house. I sold everything except for shoes and clothes. So I know a lot of females out there can relate to me.
Yes.
and then just drove down to Hollywood, and things were going well. And I was starring in independent plays. And
did you know anybody?
No.
Nobody.
Wow.
Wow, that's brave.
No. Yeah, just packed up my car. It was great, though. And I really thought that I was on my way to success. And then I ended up meeting somebody who courted me gifts and flowers. And I thought that this person was going to be my Prince Charming. And then lo and behold, about 4 months into the relationship, my head went through the wall. And that was the first sign of domestic violence. And I ended up staying with him for roughly 4 years.
Wow.
And I think what you're wanting is that path. What happened when I finally escaped the relationship is what was miraculous. And that's when I was able to write and perform a 65-minute solo play about my experience in domestic violence. People came up to me and told me their stories. And that's when I do something even more. 2017, I founded a nonprofit organization called Unsilenced Voices, and we operate in Ghana, Sierra Leone, Rwanda, and the United States. We actually have an event happening in Las Vegas, December 8th. So for those of you out there listening, if you're in the Vegas area, make sure to get to that event. You can find information at unsilenced.org. And then I've been speaking all around the world ever since, telling story. I coach individuals, help others overcome their challenges. And I wrote my first book, I Love Him, and published that in 2019.
Wow.
Give me one tiny second, Spider. I feel like there's a little bit of a...
Yeah, we're using Zoom. We're relying on the internet connection.
Okay.
There's nothing I can do about that.
No, I was just wondering because some of your words are missing. Like, I don't want it to get...
that's all
Is
because we're going
internet?
through the internet.
Okay. Michelle, when the person you met, like, tell us, was it in the same industry that you were in, or how did you meet him? Like, tell us a little bit more how this all happened and how you, the first time your head went through the wall, like, how did you process it? What happened next?
Yeah, of course. So Paul was a really cool guy when I first met him, and he was an entrepreneur. I was at an event. I was doing Amway way back then, a multi-level marketing company, and I ended up meeting this guy who he was successful, doing well, and he started courting me. Different industries. The similarity was, of course, Amway, the multi-level marketing,
Okay.
and the first 4 months of the relationship was really, really great. He did everything right, told me all the most beautiful things. And when my head went through that drywall that first time, I remember stepping forward and looking behind me and looking at the indentation in the wall. And I didn't think that I was in trouble. I immediately thought that I had to cover up the hole. I just wanted to patch it.
So what even came to it? What happened? What did you do that made him do this to you in his eyes? Like, that's just, I'm always so
fascinated by how this happens.
yes.
So for the audience, just letting you know, no matter what you have done, it's never your fault.
Exactly.
And what's interesting is typically in abusive relationships, the abuser will get triggered by anything. It could be picking up a remote control. It could be brushing your hair the wrong way, depending on the type of mood that this person was in. And the first time that this happened, Paul and I went to brunch, and he thought that I was flirting with somebody. And, lo and behold, that's a similar tendency of his, our entire relationship. And he got pissed off. And when we got back to the house, he started yelling at me. And then he had pushed me so hard that my head went through that wall. And immediately afterwards, there's an apology stage. And he's like, "Hey, I'm so sorry. I won't do that again. Please forgive me." And that was the beginning of the cycle of domestic violence. And in 4 years, I had experienced a lot of physical violence, sexual abuse, psychological manipulation, and financial abuse. So it was definitely a wild ride.
Could you go into some details on each of those 4 things you just mentioned? Like, how does that look? How does the sexual abuse look in this situation?
I mean, of course. So we work a lot in Sierra Leone. And when I went to Sierra Leone and talked about spousal rape, they didn't understand that was against the law, the men or the women. So when I was in my abusive relationship, spousal rape is what happened. And he had sexually assaulted me while he was hurting me physically as well. And he violated me just once sexually. And then the physical violence, there was multiple instances where I was beat for over 4 hours, strangulation, spitting, kicking, multiple times. Now, I see the shock in your faces. 1 in 4 women in the United States and 1 in 7 men in the United States experience this injustice. This is a horrible epidemic. 1 in 3 women worldwide experience this. 1 in 4 boys in the United States have been sexually assaulted. 1 in 4 women in the United States have been raped. So my story is tragic, yes. Unfortunately, it is repetitive. There are so many people who experience these same things. So the physical violence is one thing. The reason why people stay is the emotional manipulation, the cycle in domestic violence. That emotional manipulation looks like him threatening my family, threatening me, threatening my life, saying that he would tie 2x4s to my feet and throw them over in the Pacific. The other psychological abuse would be praising you and then tearing you down in the same, "You're beautiful, but that makes you look fat" type of situation. And it's just a cycle. And the longer the cycle goes, the more used to the victim gets, right? So it becomes natural for you to walk on eggshells, and that becomes your life. And unfortunately, that's how people stay trapped in those horrific relationships.
Marcella, I don't know if you know, she was in one as well. So she relates, I'm sure, to a lot of what you're saying. And I, as her mother, saw a lot of it, and it was extremely difficult. How did your family know?
It. So typically victims will hide it. A lot of people think that it's women really who live in underprivileged communities that get themselves abusive relationships, and that's not always the case. Typically it's affluent women like yourself who have been trapped in abusive relationships, who are dating a very successful man. That man hurts you and you hide it. So I used to wear a lot of hats. I used to wear a lot of sunglasses. I didn't speak out about what was happening until towards the end of my abusive relationship after my father had passed away.
Oh.
So my mom found out about it afterwards. And then that's when I started taking legal action against my abuser. That's also when I started speaking up, speaking on stages internationally, doing the play, writing the book, etc.
Wow.
Financial abuse, how did that look?
So in the beginning, it was shown to me as privilege. So Paul would tell me, you don't need to work. I'll take care of you. Take care of you.
Mhm.
Right. And I'll make sure that you have everything that you need. He actually forced me job. He said, if you don't quit your job, then our relationship is over. And then he framed it as something that was beautiful and a great possibility for me to be creative. Unfortunately, that was the case. I was controlled financially by him. I wasn't allowed to have cash. I would actually steal cash from his pockets of his pants when I was putting his clothes away at night, so I would have cash. We had joint credit cards that he had jacked up, and in the end of the relationship, I was actually stuck with about $60,000 in debt, and my credit went to hell. It repairs itself. So if you're experiencing this out there and you're listening, things do repair themselves. But that was one of my fears, was he was going to wreck my credit, and he did. And we bought a car in my name that I couldn't afford. There was a lot of things that happened financially, but it was the fact that I didn't have my own finances. It was harder for me to escape, harder for me to go anywhere. He thought that he owned me financially. Everything that I wore, my clothes, my shoes, the Lexus car that I drove, he owned me. And that's how he believed.
Did you ever go to the next stage of a relationship, like engagement or marriage, or was this a boyfriend the whole time?
This was a boyfriend. This was a boyfriend for 4 years. And we talked about marriage. We talked about engagement. I am so thankful that did not happen. We talked about children. I remember multiple times crying when my period came because I so badly wanted our relationship to work out. And like I said earlier, thank God that did not happen.
So in the 4 months, and this happened the first time, and he's apologetic. How long till the next time?
So the largest incident that happened was October 2012, and I had started dating him in January of 2012.
October.
So
okay.
roughly 10
months.
months into the relationship is when he beat me for roughly 4 hours.
Oh
And
my gosh.
a lot of people ask, why did you stay? Because at 10 months, that's not long into the relationship. So I was introduced to him years and years prior, before we started dating. And we became friends, texting back and forth here and there, and lost connection for over 2 years. When we were reconnected late in 2011, that's when he started pursuing me. And when my head went through that drywall that first time, I literally just thought he was triggered. It's going to be okay. I had never experienced abuse. My parents were never abusive. My parents were actually the love story in the town. So when it started happening to me, I was unaware of what I was getting myself trapped in. So at that 10-month mark, when I was beat for over 4 hours, the next morning I woke up and he was staring right at me. And I had looked like I had just completed 10 rounds in a boxing match.
Oh my gosh.
And Paul began to sob, not just cry,
Always
sob.
crying.
It's
I'm
always
so sorry.
Mm.
I'm so sorry. I promise I won't do this again. And it was this repetitive cycle that continued happening in the relationship. But that apology stage was the reason I stayed. And that's the reason most people stay trapped in abusive relationships.
Did this have anything to do with alcohol?
He wasn't always intoxicated when he hurt me. The worst beatings were when he was drunk. Unfortunately, a lot of people think that it's drugs and alcohol that will cause this, but it's just drugs and alcohol that will encourage the abuse to happen. So he had this anger already within him, and the alcohol just made it worse.
Or it makes it easier to do for him?
Or it makes it easier to do for him. Yeah. So it's interesting that you talk about that, because we had entered couples therapy towards the end of our relationship thinking that that would help. And actually couples therapy and domestic violence is not a good idea, because you need separate therapy. He needed to figure out why he was hurting, and I needed to figure out why I was hurting. But he didn't want to hurt. I remember I showed him photographs of my face that I had taken when he had hurt me so bad. And my therapist encouraged me to show those pictures to him while we were in couples therapy. And he looked at the photos and he looked at me and he said, "I just want to beat up whoever did that to you." And it was him who had did it. So it's a lot of pain that he had underneath it all. So I've reached a point where I've forgiven him. A lot of people, of course, have revenge or they can't forgive. Well, I believe in the philosophy that hurt people. So the reason he continued hurting me is because he had a lot of underlying conditions that caused him to be so aggressive. So it's the help that he needed. I believe that abusers can be healed, but you have to put in the work and put in the work.
Was he abused himself as a child? You know?
So as far as I know, he was not physically abused. He was emotionally abused, though, by his stepfather and his mom. So that's, to my understanding. I don't know if that is accurate or not. I do know that his mother was beat by his stepfather on different occasions. He said that he's never seen it, but if a child hears it, the child knows what's going on.
Wow.
I feel it's generational.
A lot of it is, it's a learned behavior. Exactly. Unfortunately, it's like
that behavior.
So when we go to Africa, in particular, in Ghana, I go up to the northern region and we go teach in like the Timene tribe and north of Accra, and a lot that we talk to, the men and the women, they just don't know that it's not okay. They're like, "Oh, I'm not supposed to beat my wife. I didn't know that." And then, some women are like, "Well, if he hurt me, that means he doesn't love me." And I was like, "No, there's a difference, right?" So it's learning a different way of life.
Right.
It's a cultural thing too, because it's learned, and in the cultural, sometimes it's generations so much where it gets accepted, and then it's just like a natural way of life. And
here, even in America, it's typically a family issue. So if something happens domestically between a husband and a wife, or wife and husband, typically families like to step in and try to solve the issues. Unfortunately, that doesn't work. The cycle continues because, like I said, there's underlying reasons why it happens, but it is very generational. So if you're brought up in a family and the family is accepting of that type of treatment, then you'll continue doing it. And unfortunately, your kids will learn the same type of behavior, and then your kids will repeat the cycle.
May I ask you, what was your moment where you just could not, like, what was the throwing
breaking
you over?
Point?
Yeah, the breaking point.
Yeah. Typically, in order to escape abuse relationships, there's a breaking point. It's the same thing in human trafficking as well. And that breaking point, the first breaking point for me was when I found out he was affairs on me. Subconsciously, I was accepting that he was physically, emotionally, and financially controlling my life. But when I learned that he was also having sex with other women. It's very to me. And I kind of lost it for a little while. And that's when he said, well, why don't you go back to LA for a little bit and get your head straight and come back, thinking that I was going to come back. And I ended up staying gone. And this was the year that dad died. And then I tore my ACL and a lot had happened. So he was still controlling me. I just didn't see him very often. And then the last straw was when he put another girl's head through our glass window in the bathroom.
What?
And she had contacted me. And that's when I was like, well, I can either choose to continue allowing him to emotionally and financially control my life, or I can choose to step up, go after him in the court system, which is what this girl did, and break free. And that was the straw for me. I broke free.
Awesome.
Wow.
Love that.
And did you find it difficult to deal with the courts while you were doing all this?
Yeah. So California, where I live, the statute of limitations for a criminal domestic violence case is 2. Typically, victims don't speak up in 2 years. It's 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the road. So I was unable to sue him criminally. Because there was a successful person, I was able to find an attorney that found a clause to him civilly. Besides that, the court system is very difficult to deal with. You have to show a lot of evidence. Emotional abuse is not something that you do on. So I was smart and took a lot of photographs of when he had hurt me. The police were called a couple of different times in our relationship. So I had a lot of tangible evidence. And because of that, it was easier for my court case to continue and to move forward. And we settled out of court in the end. But for a lot of victims, it's very difficult and tragic. It's really tragic because they try to drag you through the mud. And like he tried to blame me for the abuse, saying that it was sexually, right? And saying that I liked that.
Mm-hmm.
And physical abuse, of course, is illegal, but emotional abuse and financial abuse is not illegal.
No, it's not. And it's not widely accepted as a form of abuse. And people need to realize, if somebody is controlling your finances, you need to run because that will continue controlling the rest of your life.
So when you went to court, were you scared for your life? I mean, did you serve him papers? How did you really get away? Because you said you no longer lived there, but then you decided to file charges. How did he get? How did that work? Like, I want to know, did you say anything beforehand, or did he just get a surprise paperwork? And then
he got surprise paperwork. So I started looking into attorneys after the gal contacted me that he had hurt after me. And I had messaged him. I think the last message I sent him was in 2015, December 2015. And I had said that I know what you did to her. I don't know what I'm going to do. I just want to go through the court system now. And we didn't have any other contact after that.
Did he say anything
except
to
through
you?
Deposition. I don't know what you're talking about. That's what he said to me. I don't know what you're talking about.
Wow, so he just kind of played dumb and...
Yeah, he played dumb. But I was scared. I was very, very scared. I remember I rented an apartment with a couple other gals, and I made sure that my name wasn't on the lease, wasn't on any of our utilities. But I remember bartending at the time, and the apartment was on the 3rd floor. So I would get home at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning, take the elevator up to the 3rd floor. And I used to think that when the doors opened, there would be somebody with a Glock on the other end. And it would give me, heart palpitations, still thinking about that to this day, because he would threaten me that he would kill me and kill my family multiple times. So I thought that it was a possibility. However, I knew that I had to keep speaking. And a lot of it had to do with the play that I had performed and so many people coming up to me afterwards. And that was like, I do something. I'm strong enough to do this. I was brought up in a family, in a very good family that taught me to be, a chick, right? So I had to I had to speak up, not just for myself, but for the people around me.
Wow.
And physically, compared to you, how big was he?
So I am 5'4", 5'5", and 6'2".
Wow.
And he probably had an extra, 80.
Wow.
Um,
Big guy.
what did you come face to face in court ever?
In deposition. So deposition was the first time I had seen his face. Now, this was after he had hired a female attorney to disgrace me. So that part was hard. I had to go through over 280 deposition questions that I had to answer, go through all of the abuse that happened.
Oh.
He was a very successful entrepreneur, so he knew what he was doing. But thank God I did too. So when I saw him in deposition, his female attorney was asking me about our sex life, everything. I was very squirmy. It was not comfortable. Sitting across from me was Paul, face to face. And one time during the deposition, I mean, I was in there for 5 or 6 hours. He had mouthed the words, "I'm sorry," to me.
Really? No way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So it was, that was very nerve wracking. I had not forgiven him at that point. And I remember leaving deposition, just bawling my eyes out. It was very, very tough, but
that alone,
lo and
I feel,
behold,
is like abuse.
Yeah, no kidding.
right? Yeah, no, it was definitely a tough situation. I really do hope at this point he's gotten the help that he needs.
I was just going to ask you where he is today. What is he doing today?
I don't know.
You don't know.
Honestly don't know. I believe he's in this area. I don't know. I don't research him. I am legally not allowed to say his real name, so I don't.
You just name him Paul.
Yep, I just named him Paul. Yep. So I'm a talk about what's happened, but I'm not allowed to actually identify who he is. I actually think at one point, because of the circles that he used to run in, the circles that I'm running in now, I'm going to end up seeing him at an event. And I'm going to walk up and shake his hand and say, "My name is Michelle Jewsbury." And there are two things that it's going to happen. He's either going to run or he's going to go along with it. Legally, I can't call him out in the middle of a room.
Wow.
Wow. And is this because of the settlement that y'all did?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he's a pretty smart guy then.
He is a smart, he is a smart guy.
Scary.
I used most of that settlement to start the nonprofit. So it was well worth it. I'm able to speak about what's happened to me, just not physically identify who he is. So my story matters. My story matters to others around me. And I thought that was more important than me being able to take revenge on somebody.
So true.
Wow.
I mean, karma.
Yeah.
Karma. Yeah, karma's a BITC. So that
you can say,
is very
bitch.
true. I mean, I don't know what kind of show this is.
You could say whatever you want. Oh my goodness. Let me go back to that October incident of the 4 hours of beating. I want to know how your mental place was at that time, like the next days and the next weeks, and when he is apologetic and he's probably buying you things and being nice or not. And if he's doing this, can you somehow find love for him again, or is this at this point you're just despising him so bad you're just trying to figure out how to get strong enough to get away, or where were you at mentally?
So typically in these types of relationships, it's the best and the worst relationship you've ever had. So I still say there were times that we would throw popcorn at each other at the movie theaters and laugh and go on vacation and make love in the rain and all of the amazing things that a true good relationship is about. We had those elements as well. Elements that we all had were the destructive, demeaning, anger, abuse. And after I had gone through the 4 hours. It was a really rough night. I had escaped from him and ran down the street and could hear him panting behind me, and he caught up and told me he wouldn't hurt me anymore, threw me back in the house. The onslaught just continued. And towards the end of the night, I think he started to realize what he was doing. And at that point, I was bloodied and black and blue, and he had put me in the shim to rinse the blood out of my mouth and my hair. One of his favorite tactics to do was to strangle me with one hand and put his fingers, his other hand in mouth, and press so hard that it caused me to bleed. And the next morning, like I said, I had looked like I had completed a boxing. He began to sob. Well, when I looked in the mirror, that's when I was so weak and so upset. I crying stung my eyes. And I remember at one point I had taken a baseball bat to the mirror in the bathroom, and I just started pounding the baseball bat in the mirror because my face was black and blue, and I was swollen. I didn't fully understand what was going on, and I started to numb my pain. So this is when I began to drink heavily. This is when I began to whatever pills I could find in the house, just so I couldn't feel anymore. And I didn't want to look at myself. So I remember when he came home after work, this was 3 or 4 days afterwards, and he had saw the glass broken everywhere. He started yelling at me, and then I was just unresponsive to him. I was just stoic. And that's when he was like, sorry, I'm so sorry, and it was this repetitive, horrible cycle. It's interesting to talk about these moments as often, but in the end, all the time, it's the beautiful moments that you remember.
Yeah.
So even though I had experienced all of the pain and went through so many different types of abuse with him, physical, the emotional, financial, the sexual, I still remember the good times when we drive down the 101 freeway singing Garth Brooks together. And that's why it's so difficult for so many people to leave, is because you do have those beautiful moments together, like a regular relationship, like a healthy relationship. But then it's just those destructive times. And sometimes those times can be years apart, sometimes months apart. And it just depends, varies. Every relationship is different.
Mm-hmm. I found it very interesting for you to say, because I've talked about mine on our podcast because I was in 2. Unfortunately, I was very young, but I always tell everybody when I was younger, I would see or hear these things, and I was raised in a family that was not abusive. I never saw anything like that. And I think that was the hardest thing for my mom was, well, I mean, you never even saw any of this. How could you be in something like this? And then as a young person, I remember always saying I would never let anybody talk to me that way or touch me or anything like that. And then once you're in it, it is very, it's kind of even hard for me to still believe I was there, because I was with one for 4 years, also 2 years wanting to leave, but the threats and stuff are very scary. So you don't know really how to get out. I felt like you just feel like you can't, or there's no light at the end of the tunnel. But I find it interesting that people that are in them doesn't mean that they came from abuse either. Because my father would never, it was the complete opposite. So I find that very interesting that it's not a cookie cutter scenario.
Definitely not cookie cutter.
I wanted to say, because this is interesting for me, I have never been in an abusive situation ever in my whole entire life. And having my daughter have been in one, and listening to you, the similarities, how you told your story and how she told her story, is absolutely mind-boggling, actually, for me. Mm-hmm. And I know that I've learned so much since Marcella spoke out. And this is my daughter. We lived this together, yet I have learned so much since that to understand, because my reaction is always, but why did you stay? I understand the beautiful moments, but how could you stay in it? It was so foreign to me and so not understanding. I mean, I look at both of you and you're beautiful and smart, intelligent women, and she taught me And now you taught me again the same thing, that it's just they break you down so much that you just can't do any different.
It's just such a severe manipulation. And so it's so confusing. I felt so confused. I feel like I just was confused.
Oh yeah, I was confused the whole time. I used to write in a diary, and I still have that. And a lot of that diary ended up in my book. So I used to write.
Hold your book up again. And what is it called? What is the name of the book?
It's called But I Love Him.
But I Love Him. And that is the answer that you get. I used to get the same answer from Marcella. But I love him and all that. Yeah.
But it is. I was very confused for a long period of time. And I looked back in this journal that I used to write in, and it would go from, why is he yelling at me for spending $200 at the grocery store to, we had such a great time at the Dave show. It was this back and forth. It's like a Jekyll and Hyde. So who you live with is a Jekyll and Hyde. To the outside world, Paul was very successful. He had a lot of great business partners. He took me out a lot. So I got a lot of these people. He helped out in schools and taught at educated students during classroom assemblies about entrepreneurialism, and behind closed doors, he would beat the heck out of me. And it wasn't always like that, like I said. And a lot of people ask, why did you stay? Just like you're asking, why did you stay? I still don't understand. And it is that they just break you down so much that you think that this is the only option you have.
Yeah.
4 years is a long time. I know that we don't say Marcella's abuser's name on this show as well, but the people that knew her during that time know who he was. Is that the same with you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Figured. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't say much on that.
Right.
But yes, the people who were close to me, of course, know who he is.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So did the people that were close to you know it was going on at the time, or was this all coming out afterwards?
So I'm going to touch on a couple of different things. So I did a real good job hiding what was happening. Sunglasses, hats, you name it. One gal who ended up saying to me, why do you always wear hats? And I jokingly say that I fall a lot when I hike. I hit my head. Or for my family, I kept so much of it from them. But for my friends, they knew something was up. And what's very unfortunate is there's a lot of people who close their doors to you because they tell you to do something. Hey, I know something's not right there. Get out now before things get worse. And typically a victim leaves 5 to 9 different times before actually escaping the relationship. Mm-hmm. So my friends shut the door to me, some of them, meaning that when I finally had to leave, they had a more of, I told you so. You did this to yourself type of attitude towards me. Not all of them, of course, but some of them. So I had lost a lot of friends during that time. And it's because they just didn't know. So it's the education. You don't know what you don't know. Right. And the cycle is real and severe. And when people realized what was happening to me, it took me longer to realize what was happening to me than what they saw.
Wow.
I feel I can relate to that. I mean, I think I've actually done that a couple of times where, someone asks for help and you try to help them and you try to help them and you try to help them. And you're like, well, you can't help someone that's not trying to help themselves, but you don't see the other side of it. So, I'm just like, okay, well, this person's so much drama. I don't need that type of person in my life. And you just cut them off, not knowing all this stuff is going on, because you try to help them, but then it's like that you feel like they don't want that help, so it's difficult.
Yeah.
And
it's very difficult.
And there's such a hard internal battle, I feel like sometimes, because I'm sure you felt that I wanted to leave. It's just like sometimes it felt like I couldn't, and I couldn't, my friends the same way. I mean, getting frustrated because Like, Nicole, she's like, you have to go like right now. Like, you have to come with me right now. I'm like, I can't, but I wanted to. In my mind, I knew I needed to.
You were scared.
I was terrified. I was like, I can't go.
Yeah.
I can't leave. I was shaking.
Yeah.
Every time when she talks about it,
I know, I get so nervous. Oh, he's so awful.
We've been
Well,
doing
you remind me of one of the times. Oh, so sorry. What we?
You're good. Go ahead.
What did you say, Squid?
Okay. I remember one of the times that I left, because I left multiple different times. I had began therapy myself, and he thought that I was going to therapy to fix me, not to talk about what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Encouraged me to like pack up and get out. And I got back to our house, and I just began shaking, like you were just shaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I still remember I started sweating, and I have to do this. I took a shower, and I was doing things slowly. And then finally I gained enough courage, and I said, okay, you're going to do this. And I grabbed all the clothes that I had and threw them in my car, and then shoes, and got on the road. And I think right before he home, and I ended up coming back that time. And he had told me that he started tracking me on his phone, the Track My Phone app, and was trying to catch up with me on the freeway. So it's very scary. It's a very, very scary situation. And I went back, and then I left, and then I went back, and then I left. And it took breaking points in order for me to get out.
Do you find that because I feel that that's a fairly new thing, the tracking on the phone. Do you find that to be oddly, in a way, kind of abusive? I find that to be a very odd saying, I love this person, I just need to know where you are all the time. I just find that to be a little bit invasive.
It depends on what you use it for.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. So cyber stalking, I just spoke at the Season Center and talking a lot about the different types of abuse. Cyber stalking is a huge issue. And that's what you're talking about. When somebody is on the phone, they're tracking up your social media accounts. They're messaging you all the time. They're where you're at all the time. It's a form of stalking, and that is a form of abuse.
In your relationship.
Even in your relationship. Yeah. In general.
Yeah. I just feel like that's so like, why do you have to watch me all the time? Why do you need my location?
Tell me one more timeline. When did you leave for good?
So I began our relationship. It was November 2011, and then ended up leaving for good December 2015.
Wow.
So wow, 6 years ago, about.
And 4 months into that relationship, that's when the abuse started.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's when my head went through the wall. Mm-hmm.
And was there any red flags before that?
100%. Yeah. So he was very controlling in the beginning, and to think that it was complimentary. You know, we would go out to dinner, and he would order for me. He'd order my drink. He would carry my purse for me. He would control everything. And I didn't understand that was a red flag into the type of behavior he would continue using to manipulate me further down the relationship. And when I first got into the group, I was going through a crosswalk with one of my girlfriends, and I'm like, this is so exciting. I'm happy about my new relationship with Paul, and blah, blah, blah. I was, chit-chatting with her. And I remember getting this feeling that came on me that was just unsettling, that I'd be cautioned. It was almost like God was showing me, saying, this is not good for you. Get out while you can. And I chose not to listen. So there were a lot of different red flags, and a lot of it was, him talking to the waiters or waitresses, his friends' comments that were not appropriate, and he would laugh them off. Their way that the people around him, the way that he did business, a lot of it was just a big red flag in my face.
That's great.
Wow, Michelle.
We've had some people on our show, a guest we had who came on a lot, and her husband was extremely abusive, but they had 4 children. So it
Mhm.
became, he ended up committing suicide, and that was her only, I think that was Valerie's only escape from that. And I feel you and I are very fortunate that we didn't have children in this scenario, but I feel as though that sometimes when kids are involved, it becomes almost that much harder to leave.
Definitely.
It does. However, the people who are listening and watching right
Mhm.
now, and if you are in an abusive relationship, you do have children, if you don't leave now, then your kids will either turn out the same way because it's a repetitive generational cycle,
Mhm.
or they're going to stand up against it. So it's going to be one or the other, but it does repeat itself.
Mhm.
So if you, as the man in this case, stand up and say, I'm going to leave with my children, it will be better for their psychological well-being growing up.
I agree.
Right.
It is a lot more difficult, though. I definitely hear you. I talk to a lot of people who have children, and it's just it's another factor on top of the abuse.
Yeah.
And I feel also now, that there are special places now, a lot more at least, because it's out there more. People are talking about it more, and I feel it's a lot easier now for someone if they want to get that help. It's a lot more possible.
It is a lot more possible. So there are resources, even on our website. We have resources in every state. So if you go to
Wow.
unsilencedvoices.org, you can go under the resources section, and no matter what state you're in, you can still look up places to go. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of for men, though.
Mhm.
This is a new topic. Men are often victims as well.
Yes.
And when women throw things and spit and kick and scratch, and that's still domestic violence.
Mhm.
And this is becoming more but there's not a lot of resources right now for men. So if you're a man and you're experiencing this, I suggest you start speaking up against it. And then that's when the resources will start to happen. Because you have to think, like the women's movement didn't even begin until the civil rights movement began. They coincided with each other. So we're talking 1970s, right? So the first shelter wasn't even until then. And that's what, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So it took us speaking up against what was happening to us to finally get resources. And it's going to be the same with men and LGBTQIA people.
Yes.
We have to start speaking up against it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we have talked about that.
And human trafficking.
Ugh.
Yeah.
That
Trafficking is another big issue. Like Unsilenced Voices is, we're advocates against, and we are learning a lot about what happens in human trafficking. An unfortunate way that a victim is trapped in an abusive relationship is the same way victims of human trafficking get trapped as well. So your voice, right? That's what I encourage people to do. Speak up, start
Mhm.
talking about it.
Mhm.
Because when you talk about it, you can educate the people around you, and you can see some changes being made.
Michelle, I want to thank you for sharing your personal story. It is so brave to do. I know that it is emotionally, you bring it up again, you remember it again. And we thank you because I feel like it helps people,
Mhm.
helps others when they hear and see that other people are brave to speak up. I really believe that from the bottom of my heart. So I want to thank you for that. And we're going to come back with you on a second show where we're going to learn all about what you are doing, because you're doing a lot with your passion to help others. And thank you so much for this show. And we're going to end it and then start over.
Thank
And
you.
if you need a bathroom
Okay.
break,